guys, my name is Chelsea and welcome back to my channel. For today's video, we're talking about my worst books of 2020. So one good thing is I actually did not have that many 2 stars. I don't really have any 1 stars either because I saved those for DNFs that I really just do not like. And if I DNF'd it, we're not talking about it in this video because I do want to talk about books that I completely read all the way through and still did not enjoy. So I do have my top 10 worst books here. I do also want to preface this by saying that I actually know for a fact that one of the books on my best books of 2020 list, one of my friends on BookTube hated it. It's on her worst of the year list. So like, reading is wholly subjective. I could absolutely love something that you hate, or I could hate something that you love. I do not want to say that you are wrong for liking it or that the author is wrong for writing it. Most of the books on my list are not objectively bad. They're just not things that I personally liked. And obviously I will talk about the reasons for me disliking them as we go. But like I said, I have 10 of my worst books here. In spot number 10, we have You Have Arrived at Your Destination by Amar Towles. This is a book that is actually technically like a short story. It was part of the Forward collection through Amazon Original Stories, and it's like 40 something pages maybe total. I just really did not get it. This follows a man that is going to a clinic for like IFV. He has a consultation there because this place doesn't just do in vitro fertilization in case you're not able to have a baby. They also are able to like pick the gender of the child, pick the IQ, and they show projections of like what potential life your kid will have. And so in this story, he does get to see 3 different projections of what his son might be like in the future. That part was sort of interesting, but also depressing. And there was more to the story at the beginning of that and after that, way after that as well. But like, I just did not understand it. I do feel like he was trying to give us like some sort of social commentary or something, but I was bored and did not understand. My husband actually listened to this with me because we listened to it on audiobook, and the audiobook wasn't necessarily bad, but again, I did not understand it. I did not like it. I did not see the benefit of it. However, I do believe there probably is some that I just did not understand. Number 9 is going to be 8 Perfect Murders by Peter Swanson. This is one that I think I was just really wanting more from. This follows a man who works at a bookstore, and some years ago he created a list of like 8 perfect murders from like murder mysteries, and an FBI agent comes up to him and is like, hey, somebody has actually started using your list to do murders. Can you help me sort of figure this out? I was expecting more murder. We didn't really get to see much, if at all, on page for that. And not only that, but the actual like whodunit part, I just did not believe. We didn't get enough of the whodunit character for me to be able to connect the dots and be like, yeah, okay, this is what it is. It just felt very out of place for me. It felt like one of those stories that, like the cliche sort of like, oh, it was the pizza guy from the beginning of the story, like you never see them again, and then all of a sudden they're back for their reveal. And so I just really did want more for it. I was a little bit bored because I think I was expecting more of a thriller, or like, maybe not necessarily horror, but like more into the suspense thrilling category, whereas it felt more like a mystery. But not only that, it felt more like a domestic mystery. It just didn't have enough for me. Number 7 is going to be The Gospel of Loki by Joanne M. Harris. This one is a little bit sad for me because of the fact that I really did like her YA take on Norse mythology, which was called Room Marks, that I read a few years ago. But this one is an adult Norse mythology from Loki's perspective, and I think it was, again, I just had expectations that were not met. I, like I said, read Rune Marks a few years ago. Absolutely love that one. I've actually read it a couple times and want to reread it again eventually. But that one is a like fictionalized story. We have a girl character who is our main character, and then Norse mythology stuff happens around her. She gets sucked into like that world. Whereas this one is just retellings of Norse mythology from Loki's perspective. A lot of it is like a story being told to you. There was hardly any dialogue. I think we went through like almost 19 pages or something like that without any actual dialogue at the beginning of the book. And I was struggling through this one. I think it's just not the format that I personally like. The audiobook was better. The audiobook narrator for this did a much better job. It was more interesting, but not enough, because I knew a lot of the myths already. I didn't really need a play-by-play for them, and it didn't give me anything extra. I was expecting more. At number 7, we have Pretty Little Werewolf by Katie Salidas. Now, this is one that is by an indie published author, a self-published author, and it's supposed to be a mix of like Pretty Little Liars and Teen Wolf, and I don't fully know too much about either of those. I think I've seen the first like season or two of Pretty Little Liars, but it's not necessarily my thing. My biggest issue with this one is it's too short for what it is trying to be. I think it was only like 200, maybe 300 pages, and the writing style is not the best. Everything is very short and succinct and not showing as much as telling, which again, some writers can really tell you stuff and have it work in their story. But for me, this one was just very much full of cliches for our characters. Our girl fell in love with the love interest way too quickly. It's, I think, one of her very early books, because like I said, this is a self-published author, and I do have one of her later published books that only came out a couple years ago, and I think I do want to try her again with that. It's a different kind of story. It's more urban fantasy than like paranormal, but the writing style was just not for me. I'm not saying necessarily that it's not for some people, but I just feel like it was a very early work that could have gone through a little bit more editing, possibly been stretched out a little bit longer so we actually had more details and more reason to go from like point A to point B in the story. So that was my biggest issue. Number 6, we have The Friend Scheme by Cale Dietrich. This is another one where the writing style just really did not work for me. This one has a lot of choppy sentences and not as much flow to them. This story follows a high schooler named Matt, and his family is like part of the mob or a gang, and his dad is like the major person in there, but he's not too sure he actually wants to be part of this gang. He ends up having a romance with another boy who is like from the other side of the tracks. It definitely felt like it should have been more of like a Romeo and Juliet sort of retelling, but I felt like the characters just weren't fully fleshed out enough for me. I definitely wanted more. We had one character who was hiding secrets and there was a lot of miscommunication, and one thing that bugs me a little bit in this story is, while I do appreciate the LGBTQ characters, it felt like we were having too many repetitive conversations about coming out. So to the same people too. It wasn't even necessarily about coming out to Matt's dad or anything like that. It was more about coming out to the love interest, and then the love interest making sure that he was feeling okay about it, and then they talked about body positivity, but then they went back and talked about the whole coming out thing again, and it just felt a little bit too after school special. That's the vibe that it felt like. It just felt like they were trying to hit check boxes of things that teens might want to talk about, and I appreciate having some of those elements in my stories, but when you only have like a couple conversations in a book and you have to check every single box in that conversation, it just feels more like a chore list than something more interesting to me. For number 5, I have Again Again by E. Lockhart. This is one that I was originally super interested in because it was supposed to be some sort of girl that does like a dog walking thing, and then we get to see like alternate realities or alternate paths that her choices could go down, and that just sounded very intriguing to me. However, I did not understand this. I did not understand how we were going through things. Part of this could have been that I had the e-arc and maybe my formatting on the e-reader stuff that I was doing was not the best, but overall we would get her like saying something, and then we would have, here's what happens here, and then there would be right under there another option, and then under there another option. We had like, I think there was like 3 for each difference, but they didn't even flow together from the different pieces. So like part 1, I'm pretty sure, hopefully, was supposed to be like the same world or alternate reality, and then part 2 was all the same, and then part 3 was all the same. But there were definitely parts where there's this boy that she has a potential to have a relationship with, and sometimes he's really nice to her, sometimes she's too nervous to talk to him, and then sometimes he is, I want to say, just a bitch. He's a little bitch, and there's no real reason for the personality changes from piece to piece. But also, they didn't always stay connected, where if something happened in like the second part of one thing, it didn't feel like the same characters in the second part of the next thing that happened. I don't understand. Also, though, this book was written in 4 parts, I believe it was, and the 4th part was completely different. No different alternate reality things or different choices. I actually did enjoy the 4th part, except for it felt so rushed, because basically all 3 parts were one like timeline with the different timelines in it, but it was one piece. And then part 4 was the same timeline from start to finish, but completely different. So we had 3 parts of a story being told, and so we had longer time to live in that world. But then part 4, which I actually did enjoy for the most part, was too rushed. I really do wish the whole book would have just been part 4, but spread out between all 4 parts, and I think it would have been an actually good story. But the way it is now, no. Number 4, we have This Is Where the World Ends by Amy Zhang. This is the only book I actually have a physical copy of right now, because a lot of the books that I have on this list were either ebooks or e-arcs or audiobooks or books that I completely got rid of earlier this year. But this I read in December. I think I originally gave it 3 stars, but the more that I thought about it, the more I got mad about it, and so it is here on this list. With this reasoning for me, I'm going to have to give spoilers. We could have a whole conversation about spoilers versus trigger warnings, and with this book here, the trigger warnings are the spoilers for the book. Without those trigger warnings being spoilers, we would not have a story. And I don't think the shock value of using triggers should be appropriate. So this is why I'm getting more and more mad about this. So that's why it's currently in number 4, because I have other things that I disliked more. But this book follows 2 main characters. We have Janie Vivian and we have Micah Carter. Micah is somebody that we get the present day point of view from. He had a concussion or something, so he has some short-term amnesia, memory loss, and so he doesn't understand how he got into the situation that gave him like the concussion. And then we have Janie Vivian, who we get the past point of view from, and I did like Micah's point of view well enough because of the fact that he is sort of an unreliable narrator. He does not fully understand what happened in the past, what's going on currently, but I did not like Janie Vivian. She is, one, a manic pixie dream girl, but we do get the point of view from her, and she's also not a nice person. Her and Micah are friends. They're supposed to be like really good friends. They used to be next door neighbors, but she is so popular at school, he is not allowed to talk to her. They are not allowed to be seen together. She is really not a nice person, but she is the object of Micah's affection, and basically she's missing through most of his points of view of the book. And we do come to find out that the whole point of the book, again, spoilers / trigger warnings, they should not be the same thing, is because she was raped by her then boyfriend, did not think that he was ever going to get in trouble for it, decided to frame him for arson at a party. She burned down her house, but the ex-boyfriend already left, so she didn't have anybody to blame it on. So her depression got super bad in that same night, realizing that her whole world was crumbling around her, and she killed herself by putting rocks in her pocket and going out into a quarry and drowning herself. So we have suicide, depression, rape, arson. There is so much going on, but the thing is, that's the reveal of the story. The triggers that a lot of people could have are the shock value here, and it shouldn't be. That should not be what you're relying on to do your story. Now, I do want to say, there is a different book by Amy Zhang that's called Falling Into Place. I have not read it in years, but I do remember really liking that one, and that also has to deal with some depression and suicide, that kind of stuff. But I want to say that wasn't the shock value. I don't fully remember, but for here, this is the reveal, and we should not have to be worried about saying what triggers there are in the book, what the trigger warnings are, because of the fact that it's the spoiler for the whole book. Number 3, we have The Ghost Tree by Christina Henry. This one might be one of the ones that I am the most apart from like the majority of people that review this book. I actually did get this as an e-arc, and I was one of the only bad reviewers for it. This is a horror type of story, and I was personally expecting more horror. The parts near the end that were actually horror related to the killings and monster and like paranormal stuff, I liked that. However, there was a lot of stuff I did not like. Mainly the characters and how all the characters act. So the whole premise of this book is basically that two girls were torn apart in this town and found in like an old woman's backyard. And it comes to light to some people that this has been happening in general through this town through many years. The summary gave me a lot of like It vibes of like some sort of paranormal creature, but the adults don't necessarily understand what's going on. And we have multiple different points of view in this book. We have a 14-year-old girl who is sort of a brat. I didn't mind her too much, except for she seems to go out of her way to cause problems for other people. We also have her mother, who keeps comparing her to her like 4-year-old brother. He's a perfect angel saint, and this teenager is evil, basically. She is the worst kid ever. This mom never wanted to have children after her. Like, she just kept putting her down, and I did not like reading from either point of view. We also have that teenager's best friend, who again is like 14 or 15 years old, and her whole point is trying to have sex and lose her virginity because her hymen is in the way. That's actually a quote from the book. And so she ends up going and having sex with an adult in this story. So we have statutory rape in this book. I think we also have a point of view from a cop that I did like him well enough. I liked his family, but he is Hispanic. I don't remember exactly what he is, but he is some sort of Hispanic, Latinx, one of those. He might be Mexican. I could be wrong, I'm so sorry. But his like next door neighbor or neighbor across the street is an old lady. The old lady where the bodies were found in her yard. And we get multiple points of view from her as well. She is the most racist lady you could imagine. And the thing is, I can understand maybe having a racist in your book and then having consequences for them, or having some sort of social commentary on that. But I do not need to be in the point of view in her head of a racist. Like, she was horrible. Okay, so most of the points of view in this story were horrible. I think I liked the cop the best. Our teenager was okay at parts, but she was just not a very nice person either. But like, the points of view overall were horrible people. Horrible people. And then it took until almost the end to actually get to anything interesting. This is set in like the 1980s, so like, I understand that some of the racist stuff, people nowadays are racist too, but like, I do not want to be in their head to do this. Number 2, I have The Forever Crew by C.M. Stunich. Now, this one I almost feel like I need to preface. I do really enjoy some of C.M. Stunich's work. I would normally say that she is a favorite indie author, especially with like reverse harem, stuff like that. However, this one just did not do it for me, and because it makes me so mad, that's why it's so high on this list. Objectively, if I was going to like distance myself from what was going on with this one book and other things on this list, it probably would be closer to the middle. But this is the 3rd book in a series where like I absolutely freaking loved the first book, and it just slowly declined from there. The 2nd book was very mediocre for me, and this 3rd book was rage-inducing. So basically, this whole trilogy is about a girl who goes to an all-boys academy, and she's supposed to be like the first girl to be integrated there, but she does not want people to know she's a girl yet, so she like cuts off all her hair, wears the boys' clothes. It's Oran High School Host Club-ish in that aspect. But then as she's there, she very early on finds out that they did try to do another girl into the school previously, but she was killed, and now somebody seems to be coming after her. This is a reverse harem bully romance. There's actually not very much bullying elements. There's a little bit in the first volume. However, the author tried to include too much romance and definitely put the whole mystery thriller murdering aspect on the back burner. In this 3rd book especially, our main character of Charlotte does not want to listen to her dad at all, even though it does seem like he has some good intentions. Maybe not the best. This book This series should definitely have been set in college. I think we would have gotten rid of so many obstacles that it seems like the author had here. But that was one of the things, but also because of the murdering things going on, she has relationships with multiple guys because this is like a polyamorous reverse harem type of story, but she hadn't really been with them for too long, and after some more murdery things happen between the second and third book, whatever, she starts to assume all of them are out to get her, like her boyfriends are out to get her. Also, the reveal of what exactly was going on felt very cliche and rushed. It was just not something that I was into. There was romance in here, but again, the sex scenes seemed to take over completely. So we didn't get enough development of actual characters. We didn't get enough of actual explanation for the murder mystery aspect. We didn't get the things that I was really hoping for and that we should have gotten for this to be a good conclusion to the series. Instead, I was mad at it the whole time. And again, like I said, it probably shouldn't be this high on this list, except for my emotions definitely make me rate things the way I rate them. And so the fact that I was so mad at it by the time I finished this book, like I would probably hate reading it by the time I finished it, that's why it's so high on this list. And then my worst book of 2020 is going to be The Art of Being Normal by Lisa Williamson. Now, this is one of those books that I definitely feel like is offensive. I know I said at the beginning that like objectively these books aren't necessarily bad. There are probably people that like them. And this is a book that came out in 2015 before I really started noticing that we had a lot of books with LGBTQ characters in them. This is a book about a trans character. And the thing is, this is another one that uses things that could be triggering or things that should not be reveals as reveals. So part of my big issue with this book is it's not own voices, it is not written by a trans author, and it is a coming out story. I do feel like a lot of authors should be able to write people and characters that are not necessarily tied to who you are and your identity, but we should definitely not have them take up the spaces of like coming out stories or like dealing with those very, very hard topics that you have no experience in. I do think having a diverse cast of characters is great, but we do not have the tools able to do that appropriately. It's just not something. So a cis woman should not be writing a trans story, especially when you have a second trans character that is used as a reveal. So basically, at the beginning of the story, our main character is using he, him pronouns. They are not aware that they are trans yet. They are sort of figuring that out. And even once they do figure that out, they don't tell their parents. So we do have a lot of that. But we have another character who is a new kid in school, and he, it turns out like halfway through the story, is also trans, and for some reason they frame it as he is more legitimate in his transness or in his gender because he wasn't hiding it from people, or at least currently wasn't hiding it from people. So even though our main character does figure out over the course of the book that she is a girl, he still calls her by her dead name even after she comes out to him, and he should know the experience of what some of this stuff is happening. So even when they're alone, he misgenders her, he dead names her. I was so freaking uncomfortable with this story. And again, it's not something that is necessarily written bad. Like the actual writing style is not bad. The storytelling was not horrible, but the topics that it talked about and the fact that we still have dead naming and misgendering of our main character throughout the ending of the book by another character that was trans, just because that's what the thing is, I don't fully know the reason. Once she comes out to that character, even when they're alone and not having to hide stuff from other people, she is still dead named and misgendered, and I can't stand it. It is just one of those ones that, again, if it was a different story from this author with that same writing style, it would probably be closer to a 3 stars, but with how mad it made me because of everything that went on in the book, it is literally my worst book of the year. I hope my thoughts were coherent and well thought out. I was not at all trying to belittle any authors or readers who happen to like these. I have had a book that I really enjoyed be called Trash, and all the readers that love it are trash, by some booktubers in the past, and let me tell you, I know how it feels to think that you are wrong for liking something. Just because I do not like it does not mean you are not allowed to like it. So enjoy away. This is just my opinion, and that is it. If you guys like this video, give it a thumbs up to let me know. Subscribe to this channel if you would like to see more videos. I do have videos up Mondays, Thursdays, and sometimes Saturdays, so I will see you then. Bye!